You're very welcome. So I'm gonna start this panel. Thank you very much. You're in the West meets East room here. My name's Dave Bradley. I'm the COO of Steel Media, the organisers of this event and the publishers of Pocket Gamer and BlockchainGamer.biz. This panel is the experiences of publishing in and out of Asia. So we're going to have a lively panel conversation here today. We're still waiting for one of our panelists, but I'm going to introduce everyone else. And when Bingbing shows up, we'll introduce her as well. The purpose of this panel is to discuss our experiences of publishing Western games in Asia and of publishing Asian games in the West. We're going to be sharing our highs and lows of that experience and hopefully passing on some useful insight to the audience. I'd like to keep it practical and also draw on your personal stories and advice. Come on in. We're all here. The gang's all here. I haven't done the introductions yet, so we'll get there. So we're going to have some time for questions at the end, I hope. But I want this panel to be practical. So if anything occurs that is said that you want to chip in on, please do raise your hand and maybe we can get a microphone for you and we'll keep it interactive. So first of all, let me introduce the panel, or rather, I should say, get them to introduce themselves. I'd like to welcome Michelle Chen, a game developer of Soccer Manager, Bingbing Wang from Leiting, a listed Chinese publisher of video games, and also the subsidiary of Chinese development studio G-Bits. You probably saw her in the growth track earlier on today. Also, we've got Miley Chen from the huge Tencent, who's got particular responsibility for bringing indie games to China. Allison Bilas from JoyPac, a mobile games publisher, and Aurelien from well-known international publisher Ubisoft. So what I'd like to do first of all is maybe start with you, Allison, and come down the line. Could you just introduce yourself and your company a little bit and put it in context of what it is that you do?
Sure. Yeah, Allison, Bilas, and from JoyPac. We are a mobile game publisher primarily focused on the China market, so helping developers get into China and publish their games there. We also have done a couple of global deals recently, and so are expanding that way as well. But we're focused on casual, hyper-casual games, and games that really monetize through advertising in particular.
Hi, everybody. I'm Aurelien from Ubisoft. So we are one of the biggest developers and publisher with a presence across more than 30 countries. I'm personally the head of China, and I'm in charge of both. So we have studios in Shanghai and Chengdu, and also a publishing house to bring the games and the content we are developing across all of our studio in China.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Miley Chen from Tencent. I was Europe Mobile BD lead at NetEase from the over past 4 years, and by end of last year, I joined Tencent, the AIDS publishing program, focused to looking indie games to publish for China. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Chan. I'm from Soccer Manager. I am the one to liaise with our Chinese publishers and ourselves. Basically what we do is soccer management games.
Sorry, we haven't got quite enough mics, so you're going to have to share.
It's all right.
Hello everyone, my name is Bingbing Wang. I'm from Leiting Games, which we start with a Chinese publisher here, and then in 3 years we start explore the global markets also.
Great, thank you very much. So a range of experience there. What I'd like to do is start with Michelle and talk about Soccer Manager to there. Let's talk about the reality of getting published in China. It's a huge market, and we often talk about what a great opportunity it is for international developers. But Michelle, can you kick us off by sharing what you discovered? How hard was it to get your game out there into Asia?
Thanks, Dave. Basically, we signed a contract with a Chinese publishers roughly about 2 years ago. We signed 2 games with them. There's Football Clash and then there's Soccer Manager 18. Unfortunately, Football Clash was stuck in the ISBN shutdown. No, Football Clash was released in China, but Soccer Manager 18 was stuck in a shutdown. The game was complete development, but the game cannot be published in China. There's about a few hundred app stores in China. Our publishers have chosen roughly about 20 top app stores for our game to be published in China. There's different SDKs to integrate and also different bug fixes. It's multiple times of work comparing to the West when there's only iOS and Google Play. Another thing is time differences, especially when there's 7-8 hours time differences between our publishers and ourselves. When we start work, they finish work. When we finish work, they're already asleep. So everything's quite time critical. Also, one more thing is getting the money out of China. Because there's 16% taxes that we had to pay. There's 10% withholding tax, and then there's 6% VAT. There's much more, but I'm sure that our panelists can top it off.
Can the rest of you relate to that as well? So things like time differences and the fragmentation of SDKs. Does anyone else have any experience of that too? What was it as hard for other publishers here as Michelle has mentioned? Allison, what's your experience?
Yeah, definitely the time zone difference. I mean, we work with developers outside of China to help them get into China, and work at the office in Copenhagen is kind of the interface for that. So all of the legality, of the contracts and things like that happen out of Copenhagen for us. But then, of course, we have our operations team in Beijing. So I like to say that, like, the moment I wake up in the morning, I hit the ground running because I have a bunch of WeChat and Slack messages to get going on. But for us, as the publisher, we really take on that trouble, I guess, of kind of going back and forth. So we like to say that we blend the best of the West and the East, and that the communication happens out of Copenhagen. So we try to lighten the load in our business practices.
And anyone else? Or what's your understanding of the biggest challenge with publishing in China?
So for us, we have two different cases. So in some games, which are the global build operated in China, we team up with one of our studios, which is developing the games. So we often use mainly on production guideline and event management with them directly. That's mainly on the console and HD side, which are very heavy production games. Like there's 600-700 people per games. So we usually focus on a global build, but working with them on operations side. For the mobile game, what we do, I've set up a local team, which is actually taking the source code from the main developers, which is always the Ubisoft developers, and we organize and we operate a local version for the Chinese market in China.
Right.
Because it's very simple to basically sync up the code. They often use Unity and not big in-house engine. So let's say for mobile, we handle everything from the code to the culturalization of the build and the operation from China, either Shanghai or Chengdu. And for the big project, we have the same jet lag issue.
Right.
But we basically, for us, I think it's a matter of business model also. So on mobile, we have more than 3 million MAU in China, while on PC, we have only 1 million MAU. So for us, mobile always been a very big drive in China, while the whole company is mainly PC and console oriented. Right.
Actually, let's ask another question here that's related to that. For people here who are at our event who are unfamiliar with the difference between the Asian market and perhaps publishing in the West, and they've got a game that they want to take to different territories, how should they understand the different markets? What's the difference, perhaps, between publishing a game in Europe and publishing it in China? Bingbing, what do you understand the difference to be?
Generally, I think it's really huge difference. And so, as where I know, the difficult actually as just explore the overseas publisher. So because most Chinese game players experience game education is shortened compared to Western players. So when you're doing the Wild World publisher, you need to prepare more contents for overseas the Wild World users. Otherwise, you really run out the content super quick. Usually, if you have 3 months content for your publishing in China, but when you're doing outside of China, it's running 1.5 to 2 months. They will finish it. So you need to prepare as many as you can.
For Tencent, I think that, when we talk about publishing Chinese games in the West, it's also very difficult because we're still a baby when publishing games globally. So, and especially that when you have a game that already makes billions of revenue in China. So when you take a look at the Western, people somehow will expect that, okay, you know, that's the revenue we should make from the market. So I have to say that is a top start when we try to launch the mid-core, hardcore games in the West. And I think one the most impression is that the mindset of launching a game in China and in the West is completely different, because when we launch a game in China, we tweak everything in-house, we do lots of user analysis and tweak the game, just channel tests. And when we launch a game that, you know, the commercial launch goes big, like, you know, celebrity endorsement, press announcement, and lots of offline events, and you spend half of the marketing spend budget in the first maybe 3 months. But in the West, it's completely different, because in the West, you launch a game, spend just little UA and tweak the game until the metrics really good, and then you will start commercial launch. So I think the time and the length of launching again is very different. So we're still learning from the experience by the projects.
I think we'll talk in a minute about the value of having partners in the East and West. But one thing I wanted to talk about briefly is that a year or so ago, it was actually impossible to get a new game published in China, right? Because there was the regulations meant there was a freeze. How did that affect you, and how has it affected the situation now? Is it easier to get a game launched now? Perhaps you want to take that, or does anyone have any insight?
Yeah, so I can talk about that, because I'm half agree with that point.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to make business on some Apple Store, Steam, Uplay, PlayStation, Xbox, the ban does not affect you at all. It's a matter of platforms, not of content, actually.
Okay.
So for us at Ubisoft, all the games the last years has been released as usual.
Okay.
So that means all of our games are, as usual, localized, culturalized, and we are pushing in China with the PR and the marketing team locally. Where it's getting tricky is when you want to do specific build for specific Chinese channels. Here you get blocked. Okay. But it's just a part of the business. So I think you can still manage to do some revenues, take some market share, and also I think it helps you to just bring the good one. Because before we had a tendency to put everything to the censorship, why now we are picking up a bit better the product. That's the main difference. But yes, some products isn't working with you guys. I've been working for their publishing numbers since more than a year now. While on the other side, we also have games that have the publishing numbers since more than a year, but we didn't release. So it's I think it's a tricky question, but today if any developers want to reach China on PC, they put it on Steam, and Chinese users go with their Alipay or Tenpay and make again the content, basically.
Actually, so let's stay with you for a moment. As an international player with several local deals signed, how can a publishing partner really help a game get published in Asia? That's the thing. If you're a developer, what do they need, and what can they get from working with a company like yours? Oh, let's start with that.
Sure. For us, it is kind of like you were saying. I think it's similar. It's like turning the source code over, and we run and operate it in China for developers. We do the localization, culturalization. Right. We put the SDKs in that are needed for tracking, for social sharing. For a lot of developers, that's difficult because they don't speak Chinese, which is why you have local teams to do that. So as a publisher, we handle all of that, regulation, really every piece of it. And one of our big value propositions is that you can turn the game over to us and we will run it and operate it for you, so that maybe you can focus on other markets or other games, or specifically on making updates for your game, as opposed to kind of doing all of the operations around it that are a bit cumbersome at times.
Miley, do you want to chip in on that?
And I think it really depends what's the developer's ambitions. I mean, Aurelien say that, there's a Steam, and for mobile, there's an App Store, and you can actually just click, when you launch the game globally, just click China. But if we talk about to really bring the game to the massive, all the Chinese audience, working with a local partner is very essential. So first, a local Chinese partner normally, especially for mid-core, hardcore games, we will culturalize the game. So to really make the game fit with the Chinese audience, like, for example, to make a tutorial to let the Chinese players better understand, to optimize the monetization system, to add more social features that you can play with your friends. And secondly, the platforms. I actually did a sharing about the Chinese market today morning about some App Store stacks. So if we by downloads, the iOS App Store versus Android, currently iOS is just 18%, 1/8. And Android, all the Android channels, no Google Play, they have 72% by downloads. And if it's by revenue, iOS only took around 45% and Android 55%. So if you're just self-published in China on iOS by yourself, yes, you don't need to wait for the ISBN, but at the meantime, you're giving up the 55% of the revenue.
Okay, that's interesting. Michelle, did you publish your game with a partner in China? So what was your experience of working with a partner? What did they bring to you that you needed from them? How was it? What did you get from working with a partner? How did they help you?
Working with our Chinese partners, how did they help me?
Sorry?
The publisher help you? For the Chinese partners, how they helped us is basically they helped us in getting the copyright, also the ISBN number. Since I previously mentioned that SM18 was locked in the shutdown, they was just there to wait for the ISBN to be approved, and luckily it was approved for the newer iteration SM19, which was got approved this beginning of this year. So currently this game is out in China now. So also is monetization helping us changing features to adapt to Chinese users and localizing like the languages, etc. Because some of the slangs in Chinese doesn't really translate directly to English, or English doesn't translate directly to Chinese. So basically, that would be it.
Gotcha.
Dave, I just want to add something per what you're saying. So I'm not saying to any developer here that you have to get off of the Android market. Definitely not. But what I'm saying is, with iOS market, you can still learn a lot about your Chinese community. You can tweak your games, and actually, if your game is good on iOS, you have more chance to get a partner on Android. Because platform in China, if you compare to the Western platforms on mobile, which are simple, there's two, basically. In one side, they are editorial-based. In the other side, they are KPI driven. So basically, having a good game on iOS with KPI is a way for you to get a good deal on Android. And I think this is why it's super important, because if you don't do that, then you don't have KPI, and then they will tell you your game is not good for the market because we want to make money in our platforms, and then you will always be in a weak positions when you have to negotiate something. Well, when you have your iOS out version on China, you have users, you have tractions, you have consumers, and you can try to say, okay, the game is good, so know how I can bring it on Android. If not, you may wait 18, 24 months for nothing. That's more my point.
Right.
It's business driven.
Like a quick number on that too, that there are 250 million iOS devices in China, and there are 250 million mobile phones in the United States, Android and iOS. So just iOS alone in China is such a huge opportunity anyway to go for and really open up that market.
Absolutely. I was reading on a Nico Partners report last year that said that the revenue from Chinese mobile games is likely to rise to over 25 billion in the next 5 years. Does that sound right?
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, it sounds exciting, right? So, so let's talk about what games do well in China. For those in Asia and in the rest of the world, can we identify different types of games that succeed in different regions? For instance, in the West, I'm very familiar with battle royale games, lots of free-to-play games. Is the same true in Asia? Are free-to-play games where the market is right now?
Yeah, battle royale come from Asia, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Yeah? Do we agree that's the case? Sorry.
No, I think the two markets are overall merging. 5 years ago, you had very hardcore gamers in Asia with FPS, with MOBA, with battle royales. In the West, they were more playing casual tap games, very simple, without a lot of metadata. But I think when you come to a point where the user acquisition is so expensive right now, you need system that hook your players in retention, so you can put way more monetization point. And I think at the end, the depth of the game going to be all the same everywhere. So what could change is the art direction, the theme, but I do believe in terms of genre, the genre which are making the most of money will be successful everywhere because the market are really getting closer to each other. Overall, Asia is still a bit more hardcore, so we have a tendency to see in our games that Asia will suck your content quicker than in the West. And especially because either they play more, they grind more, or they pay to access it quicker. So you have to anticipate that if you have a content for 3 months in Europe, maybe it will last a month in China.
Right. Yeah.
You have to know as a developer.
And if you take a look at the top 10 grossing chart in China, actually it didn't change over the past 2 to 3 years. It's all MOBA, MMORPG, SLG, and a racing game by Tencent, but it's a casual, but it integrates all the multiplayer hardcore features. So I won't call it casual. And I think Aurelien is right, and we believe mobile games actually it's the games that players play become more international, and the gap between different markets narrowing. And lots of Chinese developers like Tencent and NetEase, what they're trying to do is that then actually lots of new projects they start to develop in-house 2 years ago. It's developed for a global audience. So you can see like the Identify or Disorder from NetEase or Call of Duty from Tencent and Activision. It's all global IP, or at least from the graphic side, it's international.
So actually staying with you then, Miley, there's some big names in that list you just gave there, but what about indie developers? Is there a thriving market for indie games in China?
Yes, it's quite interesting that, so I would say for indie games, indie devs in China, actually, a lot of people start to do on Steam, and because it's easy, especially that to publish the mobile game or on the game on Steam, it's more easy because the channel are less fragmented, and those indie devs, they also have the experience that develop maybe from the AAA studios before. And it's also quite interesting to see that how the big players like Nintendo, EA, Tencent, or NetEase, everyone are looking for indie games. Right. I think for indie games, I still believe in indie games that it's going to be thriving, and of course it won't be the majority of the market because it's not easy, but I believe the innovation of the games actually come from indie.
Right, because you brought games like companies like Us2 and Frogmind to China, is that right? You were responsible for bringing the likes of Us2 and Frogmind into China?
From mine, yeah. So Tencent actually have this ACE publishing program, specialized working with indie games to publish in China. So one of the very well-known projects is like Monument Valley 2, and we're actually also announced that we will bring Stardew Valley mobile and Slay the Spire mobile to China. And the idea behind it is that the Chinese audience, they have been playing the mobile RPG and SLG for years already, and the market is very consolidated. But actually, lots of Chinese players they want to play something new, and those new stuffs you can't. It's very difficult that for NetEase or Tencent you can have millions of budget to develop indie games that you expect maybe low revenue income. So that's very different.
So, is it important to?
Sorry, about India games, I have feel like
of course, yeah.
So about past 1 to 2 years ago in China, there feel like a lot of India games support company include Tencent or iDream Sky or Leiting. By the way, we support Indian game and support Indian game studios also, and also everyone I'm not sure everyone here, but most Chinese publisher they know there's a new like a tap platform, kind of social and platform. So, and also there are so many Indian page like a communicate like a poker gamer here. I think welcome to China to support Indian games also, because more and more Chinese users they are kind of picky right now. They are growing super fast, so they want to have more experience. So I still think Indian game is really a huge market in China still. So welcome to do it.
Thank you.
I think there's just one thing to clarify when we talk about indie in China. We talk about premium. I think the market indie pop up because of premium business model, and it's not a matter of platform; it's a matter of business model. So China, back 10 years ago, for my first years in China, it was impossible to sell a premium content. And now on PC, China is our first market on premium.
Wow.
So it's, I think it's a difference. So then when you pull this user, we talk about 20 million users per year transferring from free-to-play to premium. When you go in premium, it's very hard to get back to free-to-play sometimes. Because you like the fact that, you're not asking your wallet every time, that you can afford some new genre that you cannot do in free-to-play. And I think it's very related to this. So players, since a couple of years, 5-6 years, so Tap helps a lot, Pocket Gamers, the Wii game platforms. There's a lot of developers that start to play these games, enjoy this game. Also, Ubisoft is in China since 30 years. So we are kind of trainings, thousands of developers making premium content. And then they go back and they say, wow, with 7-8 people, I can make a great narrative games. I can talk about something, sell it for $5, and build up my own studio. And I think now in China, you have this big pool of developers, indie developers, because they start to understand what is a premium, because they consume premium game themselves. And this is very, very new.
Right. I want to leave some time to have some questions as well from the audience, but there's a few things I want to cover first. How important is it to vigorously localize a game? Is it just a matter of language, or do games have to substantially change when they're being published in different territories? What do we think? Allison, do you have some insight there?
For the type of game that we deal with, which is very hyper-casual to casual, there's light localization that is needed. I always talk about, don't Google Translate your text, for example. Some of the things that are no-brainers, maybe some changes need to happen to the characters. Of course, there's the blood issue, which does crop up actually in hyper-casual, even that we shouldn't be showing blood, or it should be a splatter instead. That came up the other day. So these things, it's a subtlety, I think, to the local culturalization, really, that needs to happen to be aware of.
Does anyone else have any experience of that?
Yeah, I totally agree with Allison. So using a professional professional translator or a person is really important. As I said previously, there's like slangs in English or Chinese that can't be translated through Google Translate. And in terms of our games, it's not only localized in all the languages, it's also localized in terms of features, etc. Like there's a couple of features like monetization, example, like every single page on the game, our publishers would request us to add monetization. Another thing is adapt the in-game characters adapt to your territory. So in our case, as it's a soccer management game, and our publisher has the rights to Chinese Super League, so they request to integrate all the players from the Chinese Super League into the game, so it's more adapted to the culture and the Chinese gamers.
Absolutely, that makes sense. I want to take some questions from the audience, but first of all, I think I'm going to just ask you for maybe one kind of question from everyone here. So, from each of the group, if you had just one piece of advice for a developer wanting to take a game, publish a game in a new territory, what would it be? Bingbing, do you want to maybe start us off? What, if you had to boil it down to one suggestion for a developer, what do you think?
Choose somewhere really close culture with you, or somewhere you really hate. I mean, when you hate someone, you really know them where.
Yeah.
I'll say speak to your local games trades body, see if there's any trade mission that you can go to. As previously, we went with Yuki, which is the UK trades body, to go to China Joy as the trade mission. So that's how we did it.
Okay, thank you. My advice is talk with Tencent.
Yeah.
Just teasing. I would say that, first to understand the market and, talk with your friends who really work with a Chinese partner, because publisher will always say that, we're the number one publisher in China. And but even I think the thing is that to really think, each publisher, they have their pros and cons, and understand that what's their pros and cons. And I'm not sure that if the one who always say, we're the best and there's only good thing, we're gonna make millions of revenue with you together and then disappear when there's an agency, or just disappear when the contract is not signed. And maybe so talk with your friend first, and really maybe come to China or China Joy if you have the resource to meet the local people. And I think the first thing is that, to understand how the market works, and start with a partner who can share the real story and work together with you.
As a developer, I will recommend you to treat China as a normal market. So just go there. There's plenty of platforms that can help you to distribute, to build without any legal constraint. You won't reach the world market, but you will have enough part of it to get data. When you have data, go talk to publisher. Because if you do it the other way, they're going to be very greedy and you won't have anything of it. So that's my recommendation. Treat it as a normal market, but as a specific audience in terms of community. And today, you can reach this community without any major blocker. Technically, there are solutions with, a Western company like Tencent or Alibaba offering very simple, even Amazon, very simple cloud solution running in China. There's billing options now with Alipay, Tenpay, which is easy. You're not blocked like before with the billing platforms, the carrier, which was very complicated. And you have the platforms. So it could be Steam, it could be Tap, it could be Tap no, it's blocked actually. So it could be Steam, it could be iOS, or it could be even directly get some user, get data, and when you have your data, you can claim you have something, and you won't be screwed by publisher will tell you you don't know the market. But I do believe the community of gamers is a global and only one community. So just find a way to put your games into their hands. That's my recommendation.
That's so thoughtful, I think. I agree in terms of finding a local partner, a local publisher. And I always appreciate when people come to us with data and kind of you're already showing that you know a little bit about the market. You know that kind of what help you need as well in that particular market. So like the investors beforehand were saying as well, like target who you want to be working with. Do your homework of who the different publishers are, what the pros and cons are of working with them, and target who you want to be working with as opposed to the other way around.
So advising against spray and pray, like they were saying on the investor panel as well, when it comes to publishers too. Great. So we have about 3 or 4 minutes left. I wonder if anyone in the audience has any questions. Gentleman here, do we have a spare mic at all? If not, we can steal one of your mics. Thank you very much. Patty, can you? Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for the great panel. One question, is there specific or significant similarities and differences that you see between publishers in China and publishers elsewhere? Let's say from capital provided for development, the other terms of deal, terms of the deal revenue share, other things. Do you see, what are the similarities and differences?
What we see, as a publisher in China, but also kind of not, because we have our Copenhagen office. A lot of times a Chinese publisher is going to offer you a minimum guarantee. That's something that happens quite a bit in China. It's almost like a blind, here's some money for development as a minimum guarantee. We don't do that at JoyPac, quite honestly, because we have a different share of profits that comes. It's kind of like a risk profile thing that big Chinese publishers are willing to take that on for a certain type of game. Whereas in the casual space, it doesn't operate like that globally, and so we don't operate like that either.
So every deal is different.
Yeah.
If it's a question, I think you have to separate between the publisher, which are also a platform, and the publishers that are not a platform. So when you're dealing with a publisher which is a platform, basically you have a lot of chance that your games will end up only on these platforms. So you usually can negotiate a bit more of MGs because you're also going to lose a part of the market that they're going to claim you will have more marketing resources, but still you're going to lose part of the user. So I think this is a difference. For the rev share, it's really case by case. I've seen some developers only get 10% on a deal, up to 70%. It really depends on your name, of your KPIs. That's why, once again, if you have KPI, you will be stronger in the negotiation point. And at the end, you really have to keep in mind when you deal with Chinese market, it's really KPI driven. So on the way you pitch and what you show, it's about retention. It's about China platform are monetized through gaming. So you have to think that gaming is a way to monetize the traffic. While in the West, it's a bit different. So your KPI will be important.
Does anyone else take that? Or let's go. Thank you very much for your question. Another question from the audience. I see a couple. I'm going to just go to the lady behind you, and then your next, and then I think that'll probably all we have time for. Thank you.
I have a question for Allison. So what makes JoyPac stand out from other West to East publishers who are actually from China, like Cheetah Mobile, Line Studio, and ZipPlay?
Again, it's kind of the best of both worlds, as we like to say it, in that we have an office in Copenhagen and an office in Beijing. All of our operations happen out of Beijing, ad monetization, UA activities, the technical work, and all of that. And for us, dealing with developers outside of China, the legal contracts and all of that are with our team in Copenhagen, which brings some ease, I think, to the relationship for developers who are also based there or in the U.S. and other Western territories.
I'll tell you what, let's just very quickly get this gentleman's question in, and then we'll move on. Thank you very much for that. And then this will have to be the last
I
one.
think this question is mostly for Miley. So we talked a lot about taking games into China. What about taking games from China to other markets? What would you say is the biggest factor to say pub partner or no? For example, when would you go with a publishing partner or not? Arena of Valor, for example, you guys used Garena when you could have, if you wanted to, just done paid acquisition. Like, what would you say is the considering factors when trying to take a game outside of China into other markets?
Do I understand correctly that you were talking about when Chinese company find a partner for publishing the games outside China?
Right.
What are the factors they will consider?
Right. So you don't have to use a partner. So in what cases would you, and in what cases would you try to do it on your own?
I would say that both Tencent and NetEase they're currently trying to publish by themselves. Yeah, because it's the way, like when you consider publishing the games outside China and the companies that you think that they have the capability to scale the game, like the first coming to mind would be like Ubisoft or EA, right? But they don't publish third-party games. So, and actually, when I work for NetEase, it's a path that you start talk with Western publishers, and they either don't publish third-party games, or the business model that it's more they don't do the upfront as minimum guarantee or license fee, and everything will based on the metrics. But for Chinese company, they will have like when you compare, there's a case a few years ago that when you compare a different offer from Western publisher and then a Japanese or Korean publisher, it's a 50-50 rev share offer and a $10 million USD offer as MG. So it's very hard to make a choice. So, and I think that for mobile games, the market is become more international, especially for the Western market. It's different, but there's a lot of partner like agency or channels. They can support you, but not necessarily do the distribution exclusive. Yeah.
I think also to add something, maybe the difference between Ubisoft and Tencent or NetEase is. At Ubisoft, we have no choice. We have to take game from lovely studio, and we have no choice. We have to work with a lovely publishing team. While at Tencent, if a studio head decide to work with someone else, not Tencent Publishing, he can decide to do it. I think it's also about internal structure and way of working. So I think in Garena, the studio believe of the Garena publishing more. And the studio has a strong drive. While at Ubisoft, even the studio think in China we cannot do the job properly. He doesn't have choice. He has to work with the publishing team, and the other way around. So I think that also help on the decision.
I'm going to have to stop everything there. I'm afraid we're out of time. So I want to give a big round of applause, please, for our panel. Allison, Aurelien, Miley, Michelle, and Bingbing. Remember, if you want to ask them any more questions, please do look them up on Pitch and Match or join us at the party tonight, which will be held upstairs, so you can catch up with them then. Thank you very much. I've been Dave Bradley. Enjoy the next panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, guys.